Now we're going to do the overview of the voxel room. So these are again the tools. I'm only going to touch on a few of the key ones. So grow tool is probably the most versatile tool in that it's got a very strong smoothing function in addition to the brush. So it's also smoothing as it paints, which just kind of gives you a natural. I just noticed that it looks like a natural sort of stroke. Let's change to. So you'll see, like, you get always just, it keeps a very nice smoothing stroke, the smoothing, and the smooth on the. That one thing to note is the smooth on each tool is a little bit different. Like I believe the extrude has a kind of a flattening. I mean, it's again something that you'll just discover. You know, your own method of how you think something works, or your own definition. So we have the grow tool, and again, you can play with these. I think the smooth tool is you have this smooth, but this is a different subtle type of smooth. The cutoff tool, so you can slice off a piece of geometry, and this is working in screen space. So if you hit the 5 on your keyboard, you're not. So this is a perspective view. Now this is orthographic view, or so the lines are all go straight. So if I'm hitting 4, 2, 6, so these are all the different perspectives. So I can actually cut something very specifically, and I can go back to perspective view, and I know I have this slice is exactly parallel. And then you can also just keep going with your fun slices. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. So another one is the build brush. So the difference of the build or extrude brush. So grow, one thing that you'll notice when you first use it, so it doesn't respect any of these brushes. It always has its default brush, and it'll grow based on the normal. So I can make this grow up, and just basically growing on where the brush is touching, shooting off the normal. While the build brush is going to build in screen space. So even if I go off of right here, it's actually kind of growing towards screen space, not like you can't make it where the grow brush is going to grow much differently in a tangent. I mean, to exaggerate the build brush, anywhere in here, it's just going to keep. And it's kind of confusing because sometimes you'll be painting with it, and if you paint too slowly, it actually is coming out at you, but it doesn't look like that way because it's directly in your screen space. So the extrude tool does respect these things, and I'll often use this to carve in something like, if I want a crease, or even like some sort of crease, I'll use this tool, and then I can use the different brushes in order to get that. One thing I'll show you is this one will change based on the first click. You can drag and rotate whatever the brush to the size that you want. So that's kind of nice too. This is a fantastic little model here. The sphere brush is similar in that it always makes a sphere. Gosh, this is terrible. But sphere brush is pretty useful to just bash in some quick geometry and get some big massive clay in there. The plane tool is not totally intuitive. One of the things is you'll notice I have 1000% on depth, but if we went back to the default, so when you click on if you right click on the geometry, it will set the plane depth, and it's always screen space, so you'll see the plane changing. And so when I see I have that brush. Let's just go back. And what it'll do is it's going to like paint off basically screen space, a slice. So one thing that's confusing though, why I had it at 1000%, is when you do this, it has a certain, that's the depth, so it has that right now is whatever 50% percent is, it's only going to go that deep. So what I like to do is, how I use this is I just go a very large value so that wherever I clip it, it'll just delete everything from that towards me. So sometimes I just want to make sometimes I just use this for cleaning up little areas on a model that that need it. Like if I want to delete this arm, I could do it this way as well. So even 1000% isn't enough to reach the whole way here. But that's okay. I don't really need to delete it, so if I would just go and cut it off this way. So the two most useful I find for organic modeling is grow and move. So what's great about move is it's basically like a smudge tool, so you can kind of find just like the look, or it's great for tweaking. It's also great for you can use like a sharp point here, and then you can pull off an edge to be like the sharpest point you're going to be able to get with the voxel density. So that's something pretty useful. The other nice thing about this tool is if you hold the control button, it'll just grow or shrink based on the normal. So left and right, push in, but you can kind of just keep coming around and just sort of raising something. Oops. I mean, oops, I can't make a mistake on this model. So it still has its, every brush has its smooth function. I think every brush, I haven't actually triple checked that, but so this is just going off the normal, and you can sort of push in. This is great for like if this was a face, to start like helping with proportions and like just pushing in, and you can kind of mash it into place. So all this though, everything we're doing is still in voxel space. So we still have the V right there. This is just not, so it's still editing the voxels, not the surface. So if we wanted to switch, actually before let's do that, I'm going to show you how to do kit bashing, which I think is one of the better things in 3D-Coat. So we'll just do a new model, new scene, don't save, start with a fresh scene. So when you come over to the models, this is the Tinker objects, which you can download for free off the 3D-Coat website. So I'm going to start with just a model, just one of the shapes. Oops, not that. Enter. And just I want to right now what I'm looking for is how well do the edges look. It looks pretty good. So because I'm looking for the resolution. Like if it looked really cruddy, then I know it's too low of resolution. So we can start modeling off of this. And I believe this has a negative shape, so this is should be, this might be getting even too high resolution, but we'll see. So right now this has a negative, so it's going to cut out along with the positive. So like there's actually going to be a negative shape that runs along this whole object down here. So when we get rid of that, you can see that it actually has a positive and negative, which doesn't necessarily look good in this instance. So now we'll switch to another shape, or it doesn't look good in that configuration. So we'll fill that space back in, make some sort of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer, and I just hit enter. So now it's creating this shape on the new layer. And then I did that so that it won't cut out this top layer. And then so initially you might think merge to. That's actually just going to make a copy of it and then put it into the top layer, so now that this layer still has its individual object and this layer has both. So what I don't want to do that. I want to move so that we only have one layer. Move to, oh, did that work? Move to, there we go. So there, now we have just one layer I can go to the grow tool. So with a space bar, these are your shortcuts. So if I wanted to make, so I made these shortcuts by just, you can just drag this guy up here. And so now when I hit space bar 1, I have the grow tool, space bar 2 is the move tool, but I made those are custom just to me. So we can then come in here, we can smooth out a little bit if that's what we thought needed to be done. And then you can come in and start splitting this thing up. So with the split tool, let's go to our side view. And I'm going to use this cutting tool. So let's just do something small right here on the front. Did not quite close. Come on. There it goes. So I'm going to say, so the axis is over here. So if I would scale this, this would go over here. So I want to reset the axis to center of mass. Scale it down a little bit. Come on. I don't know why that happens sometimes when you use a tablet. Okay. Oops. I was getting used to Maya there. So this isn't looking that great. Let's start adding some more interesting pieces. So I said reset space because I want to get this piece back in here. I'm going to use, so right now if I would rotate this, see how that resets to always be vertical? I can say leave rotation axis, and now I can start pushing it exactly, or keeping it to its sort of local space. So let's try just, so this is going to do cut. So it's got that large negative shape, so it's cutting in and building that object. I mean, while this is not necessarily a good looking example, I'll make one more quick thing, and reset space, and that still has that. There we go. So you can type in an exact value, so like if I wanted to go 90, just rotated that 90. I'll push this in. And while this is going to look somewhat hideous right now, actually you get the idea. I mean, this is like sort of your Lego blocks and you get to play, and then it's just about managing your layers. So if you want something to cut out or merge with a layer, then you combine those layers. And if you want to, so you can start seeing like you can build this pretty elaborate, you know, detailed object fairly quickly with just using pre-built parts even. And you can make your own parts, but that's not in this video. So we have the transform tool, which is right here. So that you saw me use that before. And let's see. And then the cutting. So the cut, I like the split tool, which will basically cut one piece onto a new layer. The clone tool is going to just duplicate that shape, and then you can move it to a new layer, cut and clone. So these are things to experiment with and like get to know. But for the most part, that's how you do kit bashing. So right now, what we're dealing with, we're still in voxel space, and I want to show you what happens when we switch to surface mode. So let's just delete this guy. It doesn't even matter, but so we only have one. Keep it simple. So you'll see this says voxels. As soon as I switch this, I hit S. Now it's in surface mode. This changed to surface, and then you have a couple of key differences. So this surface will edit the surface. Oh, I figured that out freaking like 6 years ago. Right, but what I mean is it doesn't change the topology. It'll just, so like it just moves the surface already around. So if I go really strong with that, you see it just stretching out those it's just stretching out the same number of vertices, the same same mesh. So these tools are pretty great to just start making some rough edits on the surface. And it's also very fast. But the real genius is in the live clay tools. That's what LC stands for. So the live clay is just got, you can actually use it almost just like voxels. It's like when you come in and you cut something off, it'll have a really nice sharp edge. So it looks like that because we're going through we were going through the mirror, but you get like a really nice sharp edge that you don't actually get when you do that if you would cut that in voxels, because you'd still be back in voxel space. So you can get really sharp edges. You can do this live clay brush. The other thing it does is it changes the topology as it needs to. So if we go back to wireframe just to show you what's happening, and I start painting, you can see the topology changing. Well, it almost seems like the topology changes when you hit smooth. So this is just smooth. Go to live clay, and let's just go to normal brush. And you can see that it's actually like adding topology. So if I would just keep building on here, you never see stretched vertices because it's actually just building the geometry. Actually, do I see stretched vertices? Well, you can smooth everything out, but it shouldn't be stretched vertices as much as building more geometry to fill in to keep things as smooth as it deems necessary. You will get kind of these kind of chunks, but my favorite thing, which I almost only use this for, or not only, but this is like, because once you go into surface mode, if you go switch back to voxels, it'll try to reinterpret that, but it's going to get crunchy because it's like it's going to have to convert that space to voxels. So it's thinking, and when it's done thinking, you're going to see this start looking a little bit worse because now it's back to voxel space. So you can switch, but like remember that like really sharp edge we had? When it's back in voxel space, you see how it's lost its crispness. So it's kind of a balance. I say you basically block everything together in voxel space, and then when you're ready to start fine-tuning, switch to surface mode, and then you can do things like, let me go with my favorite, the crease tool. So the crease tool to me is just fantastic for like refining. So if we have an edge like, I don't know, this one even, and I just go, actually let's do that. So it's this way. Well, it's hard to do a super straight edge like that. What it does is it's basically pulling it into a crease, and I think the reason is it's just trying to pull many different places for that brush, but it'll also just keep refining this. Come on. Go back to the mouse. But anyway, it's like a way to go from that to, if you, there's other pinches in different, but you can see that like as we go finer and finer, it's going to keep refining that edge in geometry so that we can start getting some sharp edges. I find that works a little better on organic things, but anyway, that's like a couple key features I think in the surface mode. Again, you can just play with them and go through each and just get to know them. But there's a lot here, and it's a lot of just experience, like trying something, painting with it, using it for a while, getting to see the positives and negatives, and expect to like kind of, I wouldn't say lose work, but in order to, you'll do something and may, oh, I spent all this time in surface mode and now I need to go back to voxel space because I want to do XYZ. Like if you wanted to add like these kind of models, you can't add these in surface mode. These need to go back to voxel space. Or if you did a lot of painting on the surface with like colors, as soon as you go back to voxel space, then you're going to lose all that. I mean, if I shouldn't hit this, I should cancel just because it's going to take forever. Because this model is already kind of dense. So this looks weird. It's because I'm not in perspective mode. Back to perspective mode. So just to show like the layers, one of the two important things you need to know with layers is what resolution you're at. So if I make a new layer, I can come in here with the sphere tool and make a sphere, and basically if we wanted to up-res this, let's say it wasn't high enough resolution, more likely you're going to be making something like this, and then it won't be a good enough resolution. So if we had something small and I hit enter, you'll see that it basically starts looking pretty bad because there's just not enough resolution. So you can see it's pretty crunchy and the edges aren't sharp. So if you wanted to do that, we could go back. Sorry. And I can increase the resolution with this button here. So now you see it says ×2. You could also come to the bottom of this whole menu and it says Res Plus. So you can say, yep, ×4. And now when I hit enter, it has enough resolution to have nice crisp edges. So it's definitely about managing how much resolution do you need to how much detail, how crisp do you need the edges, because if this whole ship at this size was ×4, it would probably be too slow to work with because of just the scale of what I'm working with. But it's also very arbitrary. Like sometimes I just don't even realize that the scale I'm working at is really small, so I'll have ×16 on everything because I just happen to be at a small scale. So it's definitely, the voxels are in world space, and you may need to be at whatever this number. Don't feel like a 10, or I mean not 10, like an 8 is high. 8 is high at certain scales and not high at others. So it's definitely independent of that. And I'd say that's just kind of pretty much the most important aspects of, I mean, I guess I mentioned that shaders, like you can change. So I think this is the default shader, unless it's been changed to this, which is, so the default shader, yeah, it still says default. I always go to pick, matte, gray, clay, because I think it's easier to look at than this, which I feel like is just really harsh. It always seems over bright to me. But there's different ones that you can color code just to like help you see different parts, or sometimes I'll color code different layers so I can see what I'm working with. Anyway, that's an overview of the Voxel room.